I got it.
Okay.
So then, but
that's an important one to be clear.
Yeah, no. So Iraq plays such a huge role, and it's so wealthy and everything else that in your book you say, because New York's vaporized, the president, the head of the UN is out, and Iraq comes and says, why don't you build the UN here?
Absolutely. I mean, who knows if how it will happen? But we know because of Revelation, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Isaiah, all the prophets make it clear. Babylon, Iraq, it becomes the center of all world attention, along with Israel, in the final days of the last days. And what's interesting about that, Glenn, is that for 2,000 years, Israel and Iraq did not exist. How could they be the centerpieces of all human attention if the two countries didn't exist? Now they do, and now they are dominating our headlines.
And Saddam Hussein was building or rebuilding ancient Babylon, and you have Ahmadinejad actually building roads from where they say the well is where the 12th Imam, right?
Right.
Okay, where the well from the 12th Imam is going to come out of this well, and then they're building roads that point to Babylon. So he's making a path from where the 12th Imam is coming out to the seat of power. I mean, these people really believe this stuff.
Islamic theology, particularly Shiite theology, is in many ways a mirror image of Judeo-Christian theology and end times prophecies, meaning so many of the details are the same, except they're just the exact opposite.
Yeah.
And in this case, in the Bible, the Messiah does come into the Middle East, but Jesus comes to Jerusalem. In Islamic theology, he comes to Iraq, and he sets up his global empire out of Iraq.
Can I ask you a really politically incorrect question?
Sure.
If Islamic theology, as it is interpreted over in Iraq, if it is showing the opposite, if it is showing that the center of power is where Christian theology says is the seat of the Antichrist, right. How do you... Well, I don't want to put words in your mouth. I mean, do you think...
That's the mirror image. The Muslims say that the Antichrist comes to Jerusalem, and Christians and Jews say the Antichrist comes to Iraq, and Muslims say the Messiah comes to Iraq, and Jews and Christians say the Messiah comes to Jerusalem. So that's the world.
But one of them then would be not wrong, evil. One would be preaching evil. It would be holding up the side of evil.
That's right. Well, that's right. Look. We probably don't have time to get into the details of the theology, but one of the things that's interesting, I believe radical Islam will not ultimately be the engine out of which the Antichrist emerges. Daniel chapter 9 says the Antichrist will be of Roman origin. And we can explain that in more detail if you'd like. But what's interesting is there's no question that Iraq is the center of the Antichrist reign of power, according to Jewish and Christian theology. And Muslims are creating Iraq as the center of world power. But Ezekiel 38 and 39, which is a series of wars that happened before the end of the end, describes the Islamic world as being destroyed by fire from heaven. So while there's the makings, the feelings that maybe this is all preparing for an Islamic Antichrist, I actually believe that Ezekiel 38 and 39, the war of Gog and Magog, describes the end of radical Islam as we know it, which will be replaced by a far worse, if you can believe it, ideology that will be embraced by the Antichrist.
I have to tell you, I think that the Antichrist, I mean, he can't be obvious. You know, he's got to be like Ryan Seacrest.
Well,
who would see Ryan Seacrest coming? You'd be like, he's the Antichrist. No, it's Ryan Seacrest. That's what the Antichrist is going to be like.
Well, my kids would not like the analogy. They are big fans of American Idol.
I'm just saying.
The concept of an idol and look, there's no question that the Antichrist figure that the Bible describes, both Jewish and Christian theology, doesn't look evil. He will not come with an organ going, right. You know, he looks like he's a charmer. He's a diplomat. He's somebody who understands the economy and the global sphere and wins people, is a winsome character.
Isn't there, what is the prophecy where, I mean, he's going to basically feed the world. The world is going to be starving to death. And
no commerce can be done without his approval. He will be seen as an economic genius, a foreign policy genius, but he will emerge out of Europe. Because Daniel chapter 9 says the prince who is to come, the Antichrist, will come from the people who destroyed Jerusalem and the temple. The temple was destroyed, Jerusalem was destroyed in 70 A.D. by the Romans. So we're looking for someone of a reconstituted Roman Empire who emerges. What's interesting about that, and I'm not saying by a name, but just interesting.
You're saying Sophia Loren.
No, I'm not.
That's what I heard. I think that's what America heard.
What is interesting, however, is after the Second Lebanon War, where was the peace conference held? In Rome. And what's interesting is who's leading the Middle East peacekeepers by the United Nations forces in Lebanon? That's the Italians, out of Rome. It's the first time that Rome has gotten back involved in the Middle East since almost 2,000 years ago, or, well, 1,600 years ago, the collapse of the Roman Empire. We are watching Europe reconstitute, borderless crossings, one currency, one foreign policy czar, one economic and political structure. And how was the EU created? By the Treaty of Rome back in the late 1950s. So all the people who said, well, Rome, that's not really going to come back in the end times. No, that couldn't possibly happen. How could Europe reconstitute itself after World War I, World War II, the Cold War, the Holocaust? But we're watching it happen actually right now.
So you don't think it's actually necessarily Rome, but the EU?
Well, I think eventually Rome will be the center of the EU. How is that going to happen? I don't know. There's a lot I don't know. The point is the Bible lays out some details. It doesn't give us all the details.
Is it true that we haven't bombed parts of Iraq because of not only the historic significance but the biblical significance of Babylon?
Babylon itself, Babylon is a province, it's also a city, but there's really no way in living in current Babylon. It's being reconstructed. There's no question that American forces were very careful about bombing in that area. However, there was some archaeological destruction as troops were kind of coming in and out of there, and that was a problem. But I interviewed, for my previous book, Epicenter, a nonfiction book, Epicenter, you and I have talked about it. I interviewed the chief economic advisor to the current prime minister of Iraq, and I said, the New York Times and other places are reporting that you guys have a plan to rebuild the city of Babylon as a cultural epicenter. He said, absolutely. And he walked me through the plans that they have to rebuild the city. They believe cultural tourism in Iraq will be the second largest money producer after oil 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road. Now, right now, it's almost impossible to imagine people going on a vacation to Iraq.
Oh, no. Come to Iraq.
I just went there, but not, my family thought I was crazy. President of Crazy Town. So, but look, the Bible says that's what will happen. People will come there from all over the world. Revelation describes all the merchants of the earth are coming to Iraq. That's not that far off, I don't think.
We'll be back with Joel Rosenberg in just a minute. And remember, the only way you can get an exclusive contact from Joel on the end of days is to head over to glennbeck.com, sign up for my free daily newsletter, 100% free, loaded with original content. Get your copy today and pass it on from glennbeck.com.